What happens when the player, not the character, is min-maxed? Welcome to Gaining Advantage. Welcome to Gaining Advantage. We are using tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons to help you make lives better. Just this week, we released an accessible character sheet for people with print and reading disabilities. It uses emojis and has spaces where you can draw different spell effects or whatever it is that you need to remember. Really useful for what your actions are. And this is available to anybody that would benefit from something like that, to have those visual cues to help them out. It's available free on TTRPG, and there is a link to that in the show notes. Also, if you haven't already, you can check out our Ready to Roll Fairweather Friends Kickstarter. It's only $1 for a complete adventure, and there's all kinds of extras that are going to be available for that. We're going to be launching that really soon, and so if you follow the link to the show notes and click the button to get notified when it launches, you can get it right away, including some extras for those who back it in the early hours of the Kickstarter. And so with all that, let's get right into the interview. Today we're talking with Dr. Stephen Dashiell, a sociologist who studies language in male-dominated spaces, including gaming. We're going to explore the connection between language, masculinity, and tabletop gaming experiences. Welcome, Dr. Dashiell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so what would you like us to know about you personally, specifically speaking to the tabletop gaming crowd?
That I don't only study games, but I am myself an avid tabletop gamer. I've been gaming for about 30 years. My first game was, of course, like a lot of people, Dungeons and Dragons. But my first iteration of Dungeons and Dragons was the blue box, the expert set, where I didn't even have basic because we only had one store that actually sold Dungeons and Dragons, because this was around the time of the Satanic Panic. Mm-hmm. And they sold out of the basics. So I had to get the expert. And my first actual D&D game was a D&D. And I happily walked in with my expert set books and was completely blown away, because all of the information that I had was somewhat relevant, but not very relevant to the game. But that space at a local comic book store in a small town on the Eastern Shore of Maryland actually opened me up to many other tabletop role-playing games and even miniature games. So I played, Battletech, and I played, I don't know if people even remember this game, Toon, which was...
And
Steve
Jackson Games. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Twilight 2000, and other games like Warhammer, of course. So, but I've always had a first love for Dungeons and Dragons. Even though I am a huge White Wolf game fan, D&D is my heart and soul, and it is the thing that I spend a lot more time looking at and researching.
I started with AD&D, and then I encountered the D&D rules later, and I was really confused. It's like, what do you mean an elf is a class?
Oh God, yes, yeah. Oh my, it's interesting you bring that up, because I just started playing Baldur's Gate 3, and I'm playing a halfling paladin. And there was this moment where I was like, in D&D, this wouldn't be possible because halflings didn't have paladins. I went down this whole rabbit hole of like, wow, how limited that halflings could be thieves and fighters, and that's it. And absolutely nothing else. And how the game has grown and expanded so much. And I mean, that was D&D when you had the demi-human rules. AD&D even had similar rules where, like, for example, paladins had to be humans.
Yep.
So yeah, it's amazing how much the game has grown. Now people are talking about tiefling paladins, and I'm like, what? Who?
That's awesome. All right. So tell us about your language research and especially the language of gaming and what you've discovered.
Sure, sure. So my research, I'm a sociologist who studies the sociology of language, and my research actually started with looking at the language and the capital, the things that are seen as valuable at cons, and looking at comic book conventions and gaming conventions. And one of the things that I found interesting was that I was there with a friend and his partner, got into this very strange discussion and asking a whole bunch of questions, which he didn't know that's not something you do at a con, which really irritated my friend to the point that he really ostracized his partner. And it was at that moment that I kind of like felt some level of empathy for the partner, because I'm like, wow, there are some things you really aren't supposed to do at these conventions, and there are unwritten rules, and there are things you're allowed to say and things you're not allowed to say. And okay, I get it now. And I started thinking laterally about, well, that's true in other spaces. That's true at the gaming table. And that led me to research in the gaming table and looking at particularly the kind of conversation, the kind of discourse that's privileged at the gaming table. That led to a paper that I wrote in a journal called Acta Ludologica, which is talking about metadiscourse. And metadiscourse is that conversation that isn't about the game, but happens at the game table. And if it weren't for the game, the conversation wouldn't happen. Think about like some of the popular culture references that occur at the gaming table. Like in my first gaming experience, they were talking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which at the time I knew nothing about.
Yep.
There were all of these jokes that seemed like inside jokes about a movie and a genre of movies that I knew nothing about, but I recognized that it was important. And metadiscourse recognizes that you understand that these things tend to be privileged, and that these conversations are ones that you have to like kind of pick up on. And that some minoritized populations, whether it be women or sexual minorities or people of different racial or ethnic backgrounds who might not have been exposed to some of these things that have value, have to kind of catch up in order to feel like that they are seen as an effective part of the table. And even if the table isn't disprivileging them, they kind of internalize, I don't feel like I am a huge part of this because I don't understand these things and I don't do these things.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So can you give us some examples of within the games themselves and how that works?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So another example of the way in which language is important and that there's an enforcement of language that is more poised to some people rather than others would be things like rules lawyering and gamesplaining. And rules lawyering is, of course, that kind of minute argument of these kind of breezy concepts that exist in rules. And the idea of rules lawyering, which can go on forever, and the persisting in the discussion of rules lawyering, there's something that when we look at sociolinguistics that has studied the gendered nature of language, there's something very masculine about rules lawyering, because it is an argument of a reinforcement of a point. And we do recognize from sociolinguistic study and study of gender, like that which is done by Dr. Deborah Tannen, that women, for example, and little girls tend to be taught that conversations are about compromise. And rules lawyering is not about compromise. It's about, I'm right and this interpretation is right. And you start to recognize that the day is not won at the table by compromise in those circumstances of whose interpretation of the rules are right. Nor is it necessarily a structural issue, whereas I wrote a paper talking about the nature of the DM and the GM, whereas the old idea of the DM is the final rule, and he says this is what's right and that's it. But we know that at the contemporary table, if somebody reinforces that they know more about something, and there's this nature to say, well, I've been playing D&D since blah, 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 which automatically gives you a level of authority over people who haven't been playing it as long, that can be used as a buttress, and that can be used as capital in order to have some level of authority at the table. And so, yeah, the idea of rules lawyering is very much about the language that's necessary in rules lawyering, which is always going back to the rules. One of my papers, I talk about the most effective rules lawyers are the people that quote the rules and are not looking at the rules, because that means that they have like an encyclopedic knowledge of the rules. However, there's also value in having the books that have the rules, because if you have the book that has the rules, then you can say, I'm looking at the book. And so there's an entire line of research that talks about the value of the books as texts and paratexts. And one of the things that you need is the physical copy of the book, which is something that's always amazed me in the D&D world, which has gotten more and more digital, but more and more people will show up at D&D games with like 18 books. And it's like, you know, you can get 18 PDFs on a tablet and it's the same thing, but there's value in having the book. And that value in having the book and having the book in front of you, that's power play. And it is a recognition that it is a collection of discourse, and that when people, and I've seen this so many times in games, when people do something and somebody has an issue with it and they pull out, they won't say anything, they pull out the book and start turning pages, that is most assuredly a power play, using the book as a paratext, but challenging with a discourse that goes unsaid. And this is, I mean, I find this interesting, just like gamesplaining. And gamesplaining is the idea of telling somebody that they're doing something wrong. It's not rules lawyering, but it's actually like, oh, you're doing this and you're doing it wrong, which means I know more about this game than you. And again, from a point of view of gendered conversation, and for people who come from cultures that are far more communitarian, it's about helping people. Gamesplaining is not about helping. Gamesplaining is about, oh, I'm helping you, but I'm doing it in a way that's clearly showing that I know more about this. And these are all aspects of language that I look at in games, and to understand that people are not doing this maliciously. And I think when some people hear this, they're just like, oh, these people are horrible, and you're saying they're horrible, or you're maligning certain people. People aren't doing this maliciously. This is a part of socialization. People have seen it at tables as they've grown up, and they've seen it works. And it may not be necessarily the most polite thing in the world. It may not be the most communal type of discourse, but it is the discourse at the tables that work. And we do understand that people say, well, you know, my table's not like that. Sure, every table's a microculture, and microcultures develop their own cultures of how they deal with circumstances. However, go to Gen Con, go to Balticon. If you go to a con, which is a good example of a collective idea of the expectations of gaming, which is outside of your microculture, you start to see how those things absolutely positively work. And interestingly enough, and I've talked to a couple of people who sit into my space where it's like minoritized individuals. When I go to a con, I turn into like novice again, because I feel like everybody else sitting at the table understands the game more than I do. I mean, I'm a researcher who studies the game, and I automatically feel like, because I sit in this position, that I have to prove that I know as much as I do about the game. But I try to do it without gamesplaining and without rules lawyering, which means I don't do it, because it's not something that comes naturally to me. And we find that in a lot of individuals who come from groups that may not be necessarily naturally connected to gaming, they feel that sense of, okay, I've got to prove myself, but I can't be too overbearing about proving myself. Whereas an individual who identifies themselves as a woman who is involved in rules lawyering has other issues involved with getting into that argument of rules lawyering compared to a man doing the same thing, because of the fact that there are other biases that might come into play. And a lot of my research looks at the potentiality of those biases coming into play.
Wow. This is fascinating because, as you talk about, rules like compromise, and all that sort of thing. I mean, I think about just my relationship with my wife, and I think about our conversations, and it really kind of makes me aware of why she responds the way she does at times, and also why I respond the way I do at times. And so that's fascinating. But it also, my first D&D book was the Fiend Folio, because they were clearancing it out at KB Toys, which a lot of people,
Wow.
yeah. And so I was able to get it for $4, and so I read that thing back and forth so many times because it was the only book I had.
Oh my gosh.
And so. Yeah, I learned first edition, and I learned second edition and stuff, and then life happened, and I had to step away from gaming for a long time just to be a husband and a dad and start a career and things like that. Go to grad school, and so I didn't get back into D&D until 2019. And so it was, we were firmly in 5th edition at that point. And so, but so I picked up the core books and started reading through them, and I went, oh, okay, I get the gist of this. And it's actually a lot easier, and so I liked it, but at the same time I did, I felt inadequate, and because I was trying to start up a big group, and here I'm like, okay, well, I've been playing this game for a long time, and it's always been a big part of me ever since I was a kid. Even when I wasn't playing, I was thinking about it. But we had people there that were playing that they knew the game back and forth.
Yep.
And I think this is something for especially if you are the GM, and there's this sort of feeling like you've got to know the rules.
Yes.
But I was sort of upfront and said, look, I feel like I know the rules, but you know what? I'm gonna also lean on those who have been playing for longer, and and so help me out. And I mean, thankfully, in our case, the community was very open. We had a nice mix of people that had experience, that didn't have experience. But at the same time, I have this memory of there was somebody new came, and he was playing a dwarven fighter, and he had his axes, and this other, it was this sort of random encounter of just this sort of drunk dwarf comes along and starts picking a fight and stuff, and he he pulls his axes out. He's like, oh, I've got this, and kind of the rest of the table sort of looked at him and cringed. And it was like, hey, this guy's drunk. Maybe we don't murder him, because it's not. He's not bad. He's just not really in control. And it was sort of like, I mean, this guy, the player, is someone who's just a wonderful human being, and very kind and compassionate. But he was like, okay, this is D&D. You swing axes around, and so it's just, there's that culture of,
Yes.
and whereas other gaming tables would have been like, yeah, roll the hit,
Yeah, no, I just finished a paper where I talk about that Murderhobo culture where it's kind of like you go, oh, and now I have seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail a million times, but it's like that scene where Lancelot comes into the castle and just kills everybody, and it's like, oh well, that's kind of what you do because that's what D&D is. And admittedly, there are a couple of modules in first edition and second edition that's all they are. I mean, it honestly is like, don't think, just kill and work your way to the end, and then you kill the big bad and you're fine. But yeah, D&D is, I mean, there have always been thinking man modules, but there is that idea that still is popular of the Murderhobo. And it persists, if not in D&D, it persists in games like Diablo. I mean, Diablo is like the picture of the Murderhobo. Oh no, they've all turned into demons, kill them all. Yep. You don't even talk to them, kill them all. And yeah, it's hard to dispel, particularly for newer people, because that's simply what it's like, oh, somebody's threatening us, of course we get to kill them. And yeah, it's fascinating.
So, I mean, now some of that is just different editions. Yes. Just with D&D that, I mean, yeah, early editions. I mean, I mean, because it came out of wargaming.
Yes.
And so, you know, I think about, for example, superhero characters like Captain America, like Batman. All right, when Batman first appeared, he had a Tommy gun. But now it's like the big, Batman doesn't kill, and it's like, well, he used to, you know, and you know, Captain America, he was a soldier,
right?
And like, yeah, give him a shield, but you send him out into onto the battlefield, and someone's getting shot,
right?
And maybe he holds up his shield and deflects the bullets back at him, but we're kind of looking at the trolley problem here, and it's, you know, someone's still getting killed because of his action.
Right. No, and we've I can't remember what conference we were at, but we were talking about the fact that first edition AD&D equated everybody to experience points in gold. So it was all about how much are you worth dead? Because how much you are worth translates to how much you're worth to me as experience, translates to whether I'm going to go up in level. And so it was very much about like this idea of, unless somebody's there to be the person with the literal like exclamation mark over their head to provide you information, then they were fodder. And you lose absolutely nothing for killing them. You gain for killing them.
Yeah, man, I'm like 2 experience points away from leveling up. Hey, dude standing on the street selling apples. Okay, right. I'm good now.
Exactly. And I think you raise a very good point, because when you were talking about the idea of editions, there is a level of capital that's associated with the knowledge of various editions. And yes, I think that there are a lot of people that carry into, we're now in the 50th year of D&D, they carry into this half-century mark a lot of D&D knowledge, which in some ways is utterly useless. I mean, second edition, which was probably my favorite version of AD&D, it's like some of non-weapon proficiencies, I don't even know how to explain that to somebody who's never played second edition. It would make no sense to them. I mean, they're like, is it like feats? I'm like, kinda, but not really. So it's interesting. And admittedly, one of the reasons why I haven't DM'd that much is I have a lot of knowledge of first edition, second edition. Like you, I took a break for like 5 or 6 years, and I came in at when 3 was becoming 3.5. And so I was there for like the great schism of 4th edition. And I didn't even try to learn 4th edition because everybody's like, it's horrible. So I have no capital associated with 4th edition. And I'm at a point where I feel like even though I know first, second, third edition and AD&D first and second edition that I don't know fifth edition as well. So I could walk into circumstances where I'm like, I've been playing D&D for 3 decades, but there are parts of fifth edition that make absolutely no sense to me.
So something that I picked up on when just comparing them, and I think this ties into our discussion too, is that so in first and second edition at least, strength was a very important stat.
Oh yeah.
All right. And charisma was your dump stat.
Yes.
All right. In fifth edition, charisma is huge.
It is.
It's really important, and there's so much is dependent on charisma, and whereas strength's kind of a dump stat unless you're and even if you're a fighter, I'd say unless maybe you're a barbarian, because as a fighter you can just take finesse weapons.
Yep.
And have a good dex, and strength doesn't really do you a whole lot of good unless you're trying to, swim or something, and then you can just get good at athletics and you don't even need it for that.
Yes. No. I'm glad you brought that up, because I just started playing this paladin in Baldur's Gate, and it's like, your principal stat is charisma. I'm like, what? Since when? I mean, I know historically in first and second edition AD&D, paladins always had to have a high charisma, but it kind of was like you just had to have it. It didn't count towards anything. You just had to have this ridiculous, I think you had to have a charisma of 17 or something. It was a ridiculous number. But
it was kind of rooted in the, that, well, okay, you're the sort of battlefield leader, and so you need charisma for your hirelings' morale and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, like going through a dungeon or something like that. It's like, what? Why? Yeah.
Right. And even to the point, as you noted, strength was such an important stat that they percentaged it. Where remember when it was like you could get 1850, everybody was like 1800, and it meant that you were essentially 19. But yes, no, and now strength is, and so having that knowledge, I mean, it's interesting because knowledge of all of the other editions now becomes its own component of Metadiscourse. It's a conversation that can happen during the game, but it is mostly irrelevant to the game. And I found myself going into that Metadiscourse where it's like, what spell? Sanctuary. Where now Sanctuary is one where it's like, you can do so many things and cast Sanctuary, because in the original Baldur's Gate that I'm playing with 3 people, I'm playing a cleric. And I'm like, remember when you couldn't do anything with Sanctuary except stand there and just cast this one spell or cast this other spell, and people had to make a wisdom check, otherwise they could see you. Whereas now Sanctuary, once you cast it, nobody can see you. So long as you do nothing that attacks anybody, nobody can see you. And I was passing on, like, remember when Sanctuary was, and it's like, oh, that knowledge now becomes Metadiscourse, because people are like, oh, thanks for the trip down memory lane. It's not helping us at all.
So we've also seen over the years how in very early in the game, it was an extremely male dominated game.
Yes.
Whereas as now it's there's definitely more there's still a majority there, but it's not nearly the majority that it used to be.
Right. No, that's very true. No, we do know now. Wizards of the Coast came out with some figures talking about like, oh yeah, well, it's like 50-50. I will say that a lot of the empirical data I've been seeing does not show it's 50-50. That's more like 70-30. But 70-30 is a ridiculous growth compared to visibly what it was for the first 25 years. In that, one of the things I talk about in one of my papers where I'm looking at issues of Dragon magazine is that there is a level of gender erasure. Women have always been a part of D&D as players. It's just there have been subtle efforts to not center or foreground the women who are actually players, except when it's convenient, like doing an ad or something. But you are right that the numbers have grown considerably, and I think that women or individuals who identify as women make up a larger percentage of the game. Will that change the nature of the discourse? I'm one of those. I mean, as a Bourdieu follower, I'm very much of a Marxist, where it's like, unfortunately, because the methods that exist in the game are so calcified, that unfortunately women who want to excel at the table have to pick up those male traits. Similar to that in certain business spaces, like, I don't know, gaming companies, that women have to pick up certain male traits in order to survive in those industries. That I feel like at the table, women have to do that same thing, that they have to get better at gamesplaining, or they have to protect themselves in such a way that they don't have to feel like individuals will gamesplain or will engage in rules lawyering with them. So yeah, it's fascinating. I know some of the individuals that I work with who are also academics are like, no, it's changing. No, it's changing. I'm like, I haven't seen the data. Until I see the data, I don't believe it.
Wow. That's so sad. I mean, because I think about when I play with my daughters, all right, and what they bring to the table, their perspectives, their approach, the way that they play is just like, I love it. And it adds so much. And they do things that I never thought of doing before, and stuff, and I go, wow, this is great. But at the same time, they often, one of them in particular, she's almost a misogynist in the sense that she is, from a very early age, she's recognized the patriarchy, and has just sort of struggled with that and gone, do I need to be do I need to be male just to to be able to exist in this world, and it's like, no, you don't. You can be who you are, and the world needs you. And and so to emphasize that, and to say, just the importance of sort of calling out that dominance, and saying, hey, there are other ways to do this.
No, and I hope, because you're saying your daughters do things in their own way, which is unique. I hope they bring that to the table. Be yourself at the table. That's what I say, because the fact is, it's like, people are like, do you play yourself? I'm like, I absolutely play myself. I love playing clerics, but by nature, I'm lawful neutral. And so I play that cleric that if I judge that you've done something dumb to get yourself injured, I'm not healing you. It's the worst party cleric ever, but it's me. And it's if I have the ability to heal, it's like, nobody told you to jump off that rock. You know what? Tonight you'll heal your 7 points. You just walk around with it and remember how stupid that was. There is value in bringing yourself to the table, and I know that one of the benefits of gaming is that you can be somebody else, that there is the magic circle and you have the ability to branch out from yourself, but there's also the ability to bring yourself into a fantasy world. And if those pieces of you are something that in some ways challenges some of the capital and some of the norms of the table, more power to you, because I certainly do it.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And like that's why, okay, I love my daughters, all right. But but this my affection for them is not the only reason that I love playing with them. I mean, yeah, because they do bring themselves to the table. And the choices that they make, I go, yep, that's perfectly, that is your personality, and I would have never thought of that because you are so creative in ways that I will never be. And so yeah, and so what you're saying, whether it's the character, like that daughter in particular, she plays a wildfire druid because she loves fire and she loves shape changers and she loves animals. And it was like, as soon as I told her what a wildfire druid was, she's like, that. But at the same time, it's more than just the character that you play, though. When you're talking about how you approach the game and how you approach the other players and, how you have that conversation, that too, that adds so much depth and richness to the game experience.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the problems that I found in my research, which I don't write about, but it's something that I've recognized, is that because sometimes these ideas of how we're supposed to game and how we're supposed to play are so calcified that some people don't bring themselves to the table and their characters, because I feel like some people, and this has always been a criticism of TTRPGs, where it's like your characters are just numbers on a piece of paper. Whereas where is like the personality of the character? And some people are afraid that if they bring out pieces of their personality to the table, then they will get some level of resistance and pushback. But there's value in doing that. It helps an individual grow, and it helps an individual understand who they are and how they can be more of an effective part of the table. I mean, I try at times to make characters that are not me, but by level 5, they're me. And they act like me. It's like, oh, the sorcerer, yeah, he really wasn't me. And it's like, no, by level 5, he absolutely was me.
I find that even in my villains, I'm creating a villain of some kind, and then it's like, what is, I'm kind of getting in the villain's head and thinking about what's motivating him, and going, oh, they're me. This is, if I were, I know the trauma, that this character has experienced. I know, that feeling that they're experiencing, that frustration that's driving them to do whatever they're doing, or, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, if anything, I mean, I know sometimes a lot of my research seems a little bit pessimistic because it's like, things aren't changing. Just because things aren't changing doesn't mean things can't change, but it might require destabilizing the system. That fixing the system might just need a complete destabilization. And 5th edition is a good start. I mean, 5th edition, if you put 5th edition next to 1st edition, the old box set, it doesn't even look like the same game in certain ways. And that might mean, with the influx of people that came with 5e, that might mean that we are looking towards, in the next half century of D&D, a game that is in some way markedly different. And if the game becomes markedly different, then the culture surrounding the game will become markedly different too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think about how Wizards of the Coast has said, 5th edition is the final edition, and whatever that means, with when they just say, well, it's the same thing, we're just coming out with rules revisions, and it's the role-playing game of Theseus. So, but at the same time, the game changes depending who's playing, and
Yeah.
and the expectations of, sort of bring it back to what you're saying at first about the culture, the, like, whether it's at conventions or wherever else, those sort of cultural expectations that surround it can change too, and then that in turn is going to influence the game, even if even if you're still playing with the 2014 set or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, so you just rescued a genie from the hands of an Ifriti, and it offers you 3 wishes to achieve your goals to make the world better. What do you wish for?
When you sent me this question, I was like, oh, good try. Oh, I'm doing this by the old 2E rules, and I know how genies and Ifrits work with these wishes. I'm not doing anything because every wish is going to be subverted. This is like the deck of many things. I am not doing it. Absolutely not. Oh gosh. I mean, I'm also a big believer in cause and effect, that if you fix one thing, it automatically will make something else worse. And maybe I've just watched Black Mirror too many times, but I'm like, I don't want to fix anything, because then it's like, oh, well, it's like you solve world hunger and then suddenly, like, I don't know, everybody just stops exercise. Oh God, no. So I can't do anything with those wishes. I'm sorry. I would actually give it. No, I wouldn't give it to somebody else. They'd make the world blow up. I would bury it. I would bury the land. That's what I would do.
All right, that's fair. All right, so what one message would you like to give to tabletop gamers or designers who want to make their gaming spaces more welcoming?
One thing, that's interesting. So the degree to which individuals invite others in at the ground floor, and that's the ground floor of design or the ground floor of the game, is a very important thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody needs to start it the same way, but trying to find a uniform way to introduce people into a particular system, because I feel like, particularly in gaming spaces, individuals feel kind of like they're rushed into something. And if there was some type of orientation that, and I'm sure you've had a situation similar to mine, where there were other games that you joined where the DM is like, don't worry, I'll write you into this game. And you're sitting there for like 4 hours. and eventually they're like, and suddenly an elf appears. And it's like, okay, wow. I don't know that I necessarily feel like I'm a part of the game, but the degree to which you introduce somebody into your subculture, the orientation, and this is my sociological piece, the degree to which you invite somebody into the subculture will tell you how invested they will be in the subculture. So the better your invitation, the better your orientation, the better connection that you will form. And so for designers, it's about looking at how people are introduced to the game, looking at if there's a way that they can easily slide into the game. Do the games make sense? People tried to get me to watch Critical Role around season 2. But we're pointing out like, well, if you haven't watched season 1, it won't make much sense. And it's like, okay, then I'm not watching season 2 then. So once the cartoon Vox Machina happened, I'm like, got it. Absolutely got it. It served as a wonderful vehicle where I not only got to be introduced to the characters, but in a way that I felt like I wasn't intrusive. And so whether that involves recording games or whether that involves some type of debrief and post-mortem after games in order to see how people are feeling about games. The more that you invite people in, the more that there's an orientation, the more that people feel like that they are a part of a game, the more they are going to break down some of those norms and values that are in ways disprivileging certain people at the table.
All right. Huh. Yeah. I was just thinking about a recent game where I was trying to introduce a player, and her character was in a cage, and along with some other prisoners, and it took longer to get her out than I had intended.
Right.
And I felt terrible. I mean, we found a way so that she was able to rescue herself before someone was, the goal was like, oh, first round, somebody's going to smash the cage and she'll get out and there's an axe laying right there and she'll be able to jump in. And it just didn't work out that way. And I felt really bad.
No, and your story is so, I had a situation like that myself when I started a game that I was a part of for 20 years. It started in 2004. And I decided in 2022 that I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Twice a month, every month for nearly 20 years, I'm good. They're still playing. So they're about to have their 20th anniversary, but I'm like, I'm good. But my first game, the DM was like, oh, we'll introduce you into the game. Yeah, it didn't happen that game. It happened at the end of the second game. The games were 6 hours long.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was sitting there for literally 11 hours, one 6-hour game, and one game about 5.5 hours, where I was introduced in the last 20 minutes of the game.
Wow.
And it's like, and similarly, the DM said something very similar to you. He's like, I thought they would do this a while ago, but clearly they were just fumbling around for the longest time, and I'm really trying to hurry them along, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, can I join? I'm ready. But yeah.
In our game, when things fall apart, now in this case, she was a barbarian and she was able to muscle herself out after a couple of rounds, but it was, we always say if someone shows up or whatever, if we don't have a convenient way to slot them in pretty quickly, we'd say, you fell through a plot hole. And it's also how we handle if somebody can't make it that night or something like that. So, all right, so what one message would you like to give tabletop gamers or designers who are skeptical about the effective language use in the gaming space?
It's real. It is really, language is very important. We don't think about the language that we use, and we get used to the style of language and the things that we talk about that we don't even recognize some of the long-term impacts. Dr. Sarah Stang, who is at Brock University, has done research looking at issues of monstrosity in some of the depictions of female monsters in Dungeons and Dragons. And it's one of those circumstances that unless you really sat there and thought about it, it's like, whoa, you have the night hag. Well, have you ever heard of a male night hag? Because no, they actually have a technique in which they reproduce more female night hags, and it's not necessarily, well, anyway, it's pretty invasive. But it is one of those things that, I mean, I've seen the examples of the things that she's talking about, but I didn't really start thinking about it until I read her piece and then had conversations with her. And it's like, oh crap, that's awful. So sometimes things get normalized that we don't even recognize that, okay, this is not necessarily great. But when they're brought up, we start to become more conscious of the fact of these are realities. And yeah, I mean, there are people that are not going to pick up on pieces of the Metadiscourse, and they are going to feel like they are out of the circumstance. I would recommend that people just scan the table and start, like, when jokes are made or comments are made and people have that look on their face like, I don't get it, explain it. I mean, the worst thing you can be doing is explaining to somebody who already understands what's going on. The best thing you could be doing is inviting somebody in on what is going on at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what projects are you working on next that you can talk about?
So I am about to publish a piece. I did a survey about a year and a half, or about a year ago. No, it's about a year and a half ago. And I'm about to publish a piece that is analyzing the data of that survey. It looks at issues of tabletop role-playing game and what are the things that pull people away from the tabletop game. Like, what pulls people from the table? What are the things that are important enough that pulls you from the table? And how do you feel about when you are pulled from the table? How do you feel about the gaming situation? Do you feel guilty? I'm analyzing this data based on gender because of some of the gendered research that is looking at issues of women and second shift, like the things that women have to do in the household in addition to work. And some of the preliminary data is showing, like, there were a lot of quantitative questions and some qualitative questions. Women are more likely to feel guilty when they are pulled away from the table. They feel guilty about letting the party down, about disrupting the game. Do men feel guilty? Some men feel guilty, and some are like, well, it's a game, and we understand that people are pulled away from the table. But women were nearly 67% of women were like, I feel totally guilty when I am pulled away from the table. I feel so bad for everybody else. I feel like I'm letting people down. That's pretty significant. And when we add that to some of the data about, like, who feels like they have more things that pull them away from the table, interestingly enough, men feel like they have more things that pull them away from the table. So that data is going to be coming out hopefully very soon, sent to a journal. Well, being sent to a journal in about 10 days. And what other research am I working on? Looking at some research about the idea of individuals who play in a way that is not necessarily helpful to the game. So the people who play essentially jerks in games and or play antisocial characters in games, and the possibility of some of that those characteristics coming out of the game and being involved either in the table or in their regular lives. The International Journal of Role Playing is doing an entire issue talking about issues of related to consent. And this is talking about consent from the perspective of, well, what happens when people go into this level of play where they are essentially like that one evil person in a party of good people, and they are taking advantage of other individuals, and that either happens in the game or goes outside of the game. So that paper is finishing up right now. It'll be turned in April 1st, and the IJRP will probably be coming out at the end of the year.
That sounds so important. It's I'm sure that you've experienced this. A lot of times people can sort of downplay the sort of academia, approaching these topics and stuff and saying, well, that's just an ivory tower thing or whatever. But I mean, that's just concrete, very practical. This is human beings that we're talking about. And yeah, the whole point is that, yes, it is a game. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to enjoy it. And if you're being traumatized by it or to a varying degrees, then it's not fun anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And for me, I mean, I know there are some people in game studies that talk about the games. There's some people in game studies that talk about the gamers. I talk about the game culture. And so I'm very concerned with what is happening at the table, not necessarily the gameplay. So in some cases, the gameplay, but really what is happening at the table. How are people feeling at the table? And these are, as you pointed out, these are really concrete things. I mean, this isn't like a level of philosophical navel gazing. This is actually what people can say, oh, you know, I've seen that at the table. Mm-hmm. And thinking about what causes it, what are the impacts of it? And I'm not very applied, so I really never get into, well, how do you solve it? But at least by signaling to people that this is a thing, it can encourage the people that do come out with the possible solutions.
Well, you know, and my wife would throttle me for this one, but knowing's half the battle. So,
oh, G.I. Joe. Oh,
speaking of, you know, Metadiscourse.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. Wow. That's excellent.
So, I use that way too often. She always stops me as soon as.
Wow.
That's what she won't compromise on.
Oh geez. No. I can understand that. Yeah, if people get the reference, it's like, okay, we get it. I got it.
All right. So we will have all your contact information in our show notes, but where is the one best place that you would like people to start to learn more about you or to contact you?
Sure. They can find me. If they look me up, they can find my page at American University, where I am a research affiliate in residence with the Game Center. My email address there is my last name, which is Dashiell, Dashiell, at american.edu. Easiest address in the world. Well, at least for me, because I know my last name. But individuals, if they have any questions, have any comments, and just or want any copies of my articles, because the page there, or my academia.edu page, has lots of my articles where you can just download them if you want to read them on gaming and a lot of the other stuff that I talk about. So individuals are more than welcome to check those pages out. And if there's something there that you can't get a copy of the article, you can always email me, and I'm more than happy to email copies of articles to people.
Awesome. That's phenomenal. So, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Everyone, check out the links in the show notes.
Yeah.
I really appreciate Stephen coming on and that conversation. It was just really enlightening, and I think it really makes a difference in how we approach our games and as players, not just as characters. And so also want to shout out to those who help put this show together, who help make this happen, and all of the other things that we do at Wormworks Publishing. I want to thank our new patrons, Bailey Alger, CC, and EddieBot. Thank you so much for your support. It makes a huge difference to us. And thanks to our patrons, we also add community copies to our store every month for those who can't afford our products. And so if that's you, you can sign up for our weekly emails to get notified when they come available. This month alone, we added $515 worth of free copies. There's plenty there if you'd like one or more of our titles. Patrons get access to all of our content in a modular format that we call the Lair, plus exclusive extras, including Foundry VTT access to all of our content. Higher tiers have all kinds of added benefits like monthly loot boxes. Check out the link in our show notes for more details. If you see this show being helpful, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button. And we'd love to get your comments. Leave a comment. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe if you haven't already. If you know people that need to hear this, pass it on to them. And if you, like me, think everyone needs to hear this, please pass it on to your social media friends. And don't forget those podcast ratings. Thanks so much for joining us to make lives better with tabletop games.